You like Snoopy and the Peanuts characters? Well, today's review is going to be on the recent Peanuts game called Snoopy and the Great Mystery Club. This is a game I actually was really surprised that Game Mill of all companies would actually work on, especially when a lot of their games that they've worked on are either from a different diverse of different IPs, whether it's Nickelodeon, Miraculous Ladybug, Goosebumps, and obviously Rudolph. Now, I have actually reviewed a couple of their games on this channel, but I figured since I thought this game actually just came out, and I actually got the chance to try this game out for myself, I thought I'd actually do a review on it. Before even playing this game, I actually really did not mind a lot of the Peanuts characters, especially from their specials. I love the Christmas special, I love the Great Pumpkin. I pretty much love every single special that has come out for the Peanuts characters. And honestly, when it came to like their games, there was actually another game that came out before this, and that was the Peanuts Snoopy's Grand Adventure. Now, obviously, Snoopy's Grand Adventure actually was a decent platformer, even though the graphics were completely mediocre, but it still was a fun little platformer to say the least. And since it's developed by Activision, I mean, obviously Activision has hit or miss games, especially for the licensed games as well, but still, that was a game that was actually not bad for a platformer. If anything, that game felt more like kind of like a Yoshi's Island kind of game, and that's kind of really reminded me of. This game actually I felt was a little more better in a sense because at least this game, from what I played, is actually a little more wholesome. Pretty much it's completely harmless. I found myself actually really enjoying this game. Pretty much this game is basically like a detective game. It's a lot different from other detective-based games, not like Detective Pikachu where obviously it's a point-and-click game, but I would still consider it as one of those kind of games since obviously there's been many other detective games that are really good, but that's a whole different other thing. But in terms of this game, I think this game actually overall is actually a lot of fun. Even though obviously the younger crowd, it's more for them, more so than the adult players. But honestly, since I'm an adult, I actually think this game is actually really good. And I also think it's kind of good for most Peanuts fans who actually love the characters and maybe just want something to play that's actually really wholesome. And it is actually quite really enjoyable as you go around. You basically pretty much find every objective. You tag along with all the Peanuts characters. You search around the area. You go for different fetch quests. You do different mini games. Honestly, the way the game kind of is, I think is actually really wholesome. And honestly, it's one of those games that you can just kind of turn off your brain and actually just sit back and actually really enjoy this game. Now, for most of this game, you pretty much play as Snoopy, and you basically tag along with all the rest of the Peanuts gang, ranging from Charlie Brown, Pig Ben, Linus, Lucy, Sally, pretty much all the characters that everybody knows and loves. And pretty much a lot of the characters, and based on their models, look very similar to the Peanuts movie, which I gotta say, the Peanuts movie I really liked at the time when it came out, and I actually really think it's probably one of the best Peanuts movies I've ever seen, even though I still really enjoy the original specials. But when it came to like the modern take of Peanuts, I gotta say the Peanuts movie is probably the best one. However, as you recruit a lot of the Peanuts characters, you basically kind of go around and you basically do a lot of fetch quests for them, like I mentioned, and you also do many other different objectives by finding different things, and you pretty much kind of go through like a scavenger hunt kind of way where you just kind of look around, you pretty much just find different things that you need to actually complete the level, and then you move on to the next one. I probably would say when it comes to the fetch quests, this is probably one of the only things I actually did not like about this game, but then again, we'll kind of touch on that in a moment. When it comes to like a lot of the characters and everything, there's still a lot of joy to kind of roll around, and it's just nice to see them all. As mentioned earlier, the character models look very similar to what they look like from the Peanuts movie. However, in terms of how they sync and how they talk, obviously you don't really exactly see a lot of expressions from them, but you still see a lot of dialogue and you see a lot of them kind of talk all at once. And honestly, the voice acting in this game actually is quite accurate. I mean, you kind of really don't need to screw that up, especially when most of the characters kind of talk like kids. So pretty much you kind of don't really need to kind of go all out with the voice acting. But honestly, the voice acting, in my opinion, actually is quite tolerable. And the dialogue actually is pretty good as well. In terms of the gameplay, honestly, like I mentioned, is more so like a detective game where you just kind of go around, you find different puzzles and different clues and different objectives to reach you to a different area, and you pretty much kind of do the same thing as you kind of go around each different area around the map, ranging from Charlie Brown's house, the baseball field, to the school, to the forest, pretty much every single area that's been in throughout this game. You pretty much just kind of look through whatever you need to do. And honestly, when it comes to like finding each clue and basically finding wherever you need to go around the area, individual areas kind of lead you to where you kind of need to go. And each of them, when it comes to a map base, it's pretty easy to follow. And they're not exactly aggravating or, pretty much confusing to follow. They pretty much are pretty straightforward. You could just kind of go around the areas as much as you can. Most of the hidden gems that you find in this game pretty much is like one of the comic strips, and most of the comic strips that you find, they pretty much kind of range from different ones. And if anything, it's kind of an interesting incentive for people to actually find, even though you actually can get additional comic strips as you kind of go around the game. However, if you get the deluxe edition, you get more additional comic strips, which would entice people to get more of the game if they wanted to, if they got the deluxe edition. However, if you bought the regular edition, you pretty much kind of just go with whatever they give you in terms of the comic strips. But either way, it's something that's really cool, and it's different from other things that you pretty much can find. There's also a different variety of different mini games you get to play as you're kind of going around doing different objectives for all the characters. And honestly, the mini games, in my opinion, are actually pretty cool. You pretty much can do you can kick the football, you can pretty much play baseball, you pretty much play the piano with Schroeder. You pretty much can do different mini games, and pretty much a lot of the ones that you actually do are actually really cool. And there's also one level that you actually could play as Snoopy, and it's kind of like the Red Baron, very similar to what it was in the Great Pumpkin. And believe it or not, there actually was a game that was actually based on that was made by Namco, which I actually did play that game back in the day. I thought that actually was a pretty cool game. If anything, it felt more like a Star Fox game than anything, which was kind of nice. But even though it was Snoopy going up against Red Baron, other than that, the game is really good. Honestly, a lot of the mini games in here are actually really cool. And I know some people kind of don't exactly really like the mini games because they kind of feel it's a little more repetitive, and it can be a little bit more jarring at times. But honestly, to me, I think the mini games are well done. I think, honestly, they're a lot of fun to play. Since this is a game build game, obviously I kind of want to address a little bit about the camera. I gotta say the camera in this game is actually a lot better than what the previous game they did, which is the Rudolph game. In that game, the camera was all over the place. It was aggravating to kind of adjust. And if anything, they could have done so much better with the camera and the way the character moves around and everything. It pretty much could have been a lot better. But in terms of this game, I felt the camera was a lot better. It felt more adjusted. It felt more comfortable. And it wasn't really a pain in the ass to kind of just look around and you just kind of basically can position it no problem. If anything, it felt more fixed, and I actually really like that for a lot. There are some areas where the camera could go just a little bit off angle, but I feel like that's kind of the whole point. You basically just kind of go from one section to the other. And honestly, the camera I felt was a little more tolerable in my opinion. I think for most of what I played of this game, I think the game overall is actually quite solid, and it's really wholesome, especially for anybody who's really into these kind of games, especially if they like Peanuts. However, in terms of how I feel about this game, there's a couple nitpicks I do have of this game. I probably would say they're a little more minor than anything, but still, it's something that I kind of want to address about. To be honest with you, obviously with the graphics, which is kind of given considering it is a Game Mill game, and Game Mill doesn't exactly have the biggest track record of making nice looking games, which I mentioned that in my Goosebumps review. But to be quite honest with you, the way I look at this game, even though it is a Peanuts game, the models, look like exactly what they look like in the Peanuts movie. Even though I do think that the graphics could be a little better and they don't need to look like a PS2 game every single time they make a licensed game. I just feel like they need to do a lot better. To be honest with you, if they have all these IP games, I think they just need to make them a little more better, especially if they're getting a whole bunch of these budgets and they're getting a lot better with what they're doing with these kind of games. I still think they need to kind of do a lot better. If anything, they need to make it kind of look nicer. And I get it. Obviously, they're a small company, and they pretty much are the THQ of this decade. However, in terms of everything, I think the graphics need to be a lot better. But then again, this is a company that likes to make a lot of games that look like a PS2 game. So I can understand why the graphics look like the way they are. But still, even though the character models look at least what they look like from the Peanuts shorts and the Peanuts specials, I think they need to look at least better enough where it could be at least a nice looking game. Another thing I don't like about this game, which I kind of already mentioned in the very beginning of this review, is the fetch quests. The fetch quests in this game, even though it's pretty much just, you're kind of just going around and you kind of go from each character, they want you to fulfill a quest for them, they kind of want you to do something for them, you go back to them, and then they want another thing at the same time. So you're kind of just going vice versa from going A to B to just kind of complete that certain favor that they want. If anything, I think it's kind of good on paper, but at times it can be completely repetitive. And in my opinion, I really felt they could have done so much better with that, where instead of just kind of going from A to B, then going from this character to the next one to the other one, I really think you kind of just should have made it a little more stagnant, where it's a little more organized, where you just kind of go from one quest and then you just kind of go from the next area, go to the next one. To be honest with you, I think they kind of done more better with that. But obviously, that's the only thing that I really didn't like about it, was mainly because of the fetch quests. Overall, the final verdict of Snoopy and the Great Mystery Club is that it's actually a really wholesome game. I really think there's so much charm, and honestly, I think the game overall is quite tolerable. I don't think there's really anything that I could really say that's really bad about it, even though there's a couple things. But honestly, those are just minor nitpicks, because honestly, this game is really pretty much a really good game. I do think it's actually up there as one of the best Game Mill games I've played, next to Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny, and the Looney Tunes Sport game. But honestly, the way I look at how this game is, I think it's up there for sure. And even though it could be a lot better than what it could be, but I still think that the game overall is one of the better Peanuts games I've played. And it's actually a game that I think everyone can really enjoy. Kids and adults. I think both demographics would really enjoy this game, even though it is targeted towards kids, but I think the adult players would really enjoy it as well, as there is something for them. It's definitely a game that you could just kind of turn your brain off and just really enjoy it for what it is. and especially for anybody who loves the Peanuts, I think they're going to enjoy this game. So honestly, I recommend you guys definitely check this game out, and I do think that even though it is $50, I still think that you could wait for it to go on sale, but I still think the game overall is enough where anybody can really enjoy. So honestly guys, thank you guys for watching my review, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.